Greetings, kids. Welcome to Let Me Tell You What I Know, a podcast by the Real Nubian on Twitter where I talk about music, politics, pop culture, and whatever the hell I want. Basically giving you my 2 cents nobody asked for. Welcome to episode 1. I had a poll on Twitter asking you guys which topic do you want me to start with. Talking about my job, roasting my old blog, or musical musings because I always brag about my musical tastes. The majority of you chose roasting my old blog. And for a very funny reason. Someone said, I'd say go for your old blogs because people can't try and cancel you years later by unearthing them if you already did it. And it's a very apt observation considering the current climate. However, here is the plot twist. My old blog was more woke than I am today. I started the blog in 2013 and I was feeling burnt out at work and had no way out, for the lack of a better term. So I recalled how my high school teachers used to say that I was a very good writer and I needed a way to vent. So, as all of you know, I always have something to say and I started saying it. The blog was 99% in Arabic at the time because I felt it was the language I was more proficient in, and it was on WordPress because it was the easiest platform I could create a page on. Thank you, Twitter, because you're easy. You can think of it as a reaction because I haven't read these posts in a few years, and if this works out, I might be coming for the reaction channels gig. The first post was published on July 21st, 2013, so let's see. It was about music, because music at the time played a very big part of my life. Music was on 24/7. I had music in the car, music at work, if I could, music at home, all the time. And I started the blog by a very mushy paragraph describing how music is medicine to the soul. And if you are too poor to travel and see the world, it would give you that experience. Newsflash, it doesn't. Then I started reminiscing about my childhood and how our parents had quite the eclectic taste that allowed us options beside music played on the local TV. Fun fact, I grew up in Saudi Arabia in the 1980s. So 300 years ago, before it became the strict theocracy it's known to be today. And I left it in 1990, month before the first Gulf War, and before it could have an impact on my life and my way of thinking. So when I was 5, I remember my mother playing us a VHS of Michael Jackson's Thriller. And it was probably smuggled to them by a friend who just returned from the USA. The song was revolutionary because it was probably the first music video to be played in movie theaters like a feature film. It is probably still as iconic today as it was back then. My father, I sound like Meghan McCain, I know, had cassette tapes that he collected when he was in Chicago in 1980. So we used to listen to Jermaine Jackson and Bobby Brown as well. I talked about how listening to music can actually align the vibrations in your body, and I really don't know where I got this mumbo jumbo from, but I think there is merit to it. The effect of music on your psyche can have an effect on your physical body. Maybe. The following segment described how in my teens I was introduced to the local radio station, and it played classical music. Classical Abby has nothing on me. I was obsessed with Johann Strauss and Tchaikovsky because they only played Johann Strauss and Tchaikovsky. The rest of the blog continues describing the biography of Tchaikovsky and how the Russian civil servant and prolific musical genius had an effect on my life. Everything had an effect on my life back then. My favorites of his works are the two polar opposites in my opinion, because I am very deep. The Nutcracker and Swan Lake. I was lamenting on how polar opposites the two ballets were. The Nutcracker is very child-friendly, and you could almost taste candy when you're listening to it. No, you don't. And Swan Lake gives you a deeper and more painful human experience. And this is actually true. I was also expressing my shock when I watched the ballet for the first time, because in my childhood, I watched an anime version of it. And of course, the anime version ended up with the prince saving the princess and killing the warlock, while the ballet had a different ending. The prince and the princess lose their lives to the warlock's deceitful ways. Naturally, I felt duped, gooped, and deceived. I used to feel really classy and almost Downton Abbey fancy when I listened to classical music. Probably everybody does. But my musical tastes changed dramatically during high school and the following years, probably thanks to the Backstreet Boys. I promised my readers back then that I would post more blogs about music, but I probably lied. The following blog post was really heavy. It was a reaction to pictures of children holding Arab Spring signs. 2013 was a very stressful time in the Middle East. It was the peak of the Arab Spring and the Syrian crisis, and the overthrowing of the Egyptian president, the Rabaa Square protests, and people from all sides of the political spectrum were in demonstrations, and they didn't hesitate bringing their children with them. That blew my mind. It was also common on Arab media to use children as cover faces for different political campaigns. The UNICEF had to actually point out that their presence in these demonstrations and riots was inconducive to their well-being. And there were also concerns from different humanitarian organizations that these kids were at a higher risk of physical and sexual violence, infections, and human trafficking. It was interesting because child protection laws actually existed and prohibited using children as human shields in demonstrations or in political campaigns. However, nobody did anything about it. Children can't also consent to being used as faces of political campaigns. They are brainwashed into believing what their parents believe. They trust their parents and would never believe that their parents would compromise their safety. It was such a heavy time that for the next few posts, I only posted fancy paintings from art exhibits that I used to go to. After a few months, I posted about my favorite song ever, Higher Ground by Stevie Wonder, and how this song has always managed to pull me out of the low points of my life. Afterwards, I posted about feminism-related posts, and this is where I truly cringe at myself because I was trying to reconcile between religion and feminism. And from someone coming from a Muslim background, I am aware that there are very scholarly and very highly appraised and peer-reviewed articles about this, but I personally can't do it. It becomes mind-boggling to me. The following few posts, I wore the hat of a film critic who only talks about foreign cinema. Another cringe moment. The local museum hosted an event for the works of the late Iranian director Abbas Kiarostami. He was very critically acclaimed, won several awards for directing several films in the 70s, where he was an expert in embedding very deep messages in the mundane life of middle-class people of Iran at the time. I felt like the deepest, most cultured person going to the events and writing reviews of the movies that I have watched to my friends. I wrote other blog posts about revolutionaries from different parts of the world. I had the intention of making it a series because I was deeply saddened and affected by the passing of Nelson Mandela at the end of 2013. And because he was the poster child of peaceful resistance and forgiving your oppressors and living happily ever after with them in the most harmonious way, little that people knew about his revolutionary past and why he ended up in jail for 27 years. It's funny how history repeats itself, because currently during the Black Lives Matter events, people used Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. the same way, as an excuse to berate protesters and accuse them of violence and bitterness, misquoting Dr. King while conveniently forgetting his famous stance against oppression and acknowledgement of riots, which inherently can lead to violence, as the voice of the unheard. I also found about one of the most dearest and nearest causes to my heart, the Tuareg rebellion. And this, I cannot talk about it now because it deserves its own episode. I could talk about it for hours. And I actually posted a lot about it in my blog to introduce people to it because a lot of people in the Arab world don't even know about it. I called it the Palestine of Africa because the Tuareg people lost their autonomy because of French colonization that rearranged the borders of African countries, and they were lost in the sauce. Is that a right term, lost in the sauce? Am I misusing this? Probably. I won't cut this so you would know that I'm being real with you people. The rest of the blog introduced more pictures from art exhibits, clips of songs that I really liked, and translations of Dr. Martin Luther King speeches. a bunch of feminism pieces that I wrote for the 2014 International Women's Day. And then the pièce de résistance is my favorite article that I have ever translated about misinformed Americans who believe that they live in the best country in the world. It was written by Mark Manson. I actually wrote him and asked for permission to translate the article from my blog, and he was gracious enough to allow me to do that. The article was well received by my Arabic Twitter friends, but the people I was shading dragged the hell out of me. And that was probably the last post I posted because my life then took a turn that I didn't expect, which I will also talk about one day. I hope that was interesting enough to hear and encourage you guys to come back and listen to me ramble next time. Hopefully I'll be more coherent and less disjointed and less ums and ahs and stuff like that. These episodes will hopefully upload 3 times a month on the 10th, 20th, and 30th, and I will be inserting tidbits of my life so you can get to know me better. Thank you so much. I love you all. The Nubian out.